The Premier League is going to be actually back soon, and we'll all be the better for it. The Euros were a month ago, and Premier League fans have been teased since then with pre-season, the Community Shield, and the first week of the EFL. Soon we can all stop waffling about what will happen and actually watch it, and then go back to waffling about what just happened. Another 9 months of ACCAs ruined by 10 past 3, every away ground outside the top 6 being described as a tough place to go. People crying about 1 week international breaks, any exciting game being called pure Barclays, and Manchester City winning it. Therefore, to prove my elite ball knowledge, here's my prediction for the 2024-25 Premier League. By the way, I also made a preview video where I went through pre-season and transfers, but any extra matches or signings that happened since then I will note. My predictions won't take into account any potential points deductions, even though many seem very possible. 20. Ipswich Town. Yes, Ipswich are not staying up this season, I'm sorry. Their squad has not sufficiently added from the Championship to impress me, and it's not like Leicester where they had a bunch of Premier League proven players in the second tier. In fact, a fair few of these guys have come up since League One after Kieran McKenna managed to get them promoted twice in a row. Since the preview video, they won 1-0 in their last pre-season friendly at home to Nice. Looking at their senior signings, Amari Hutchinson is another Chelsea conveyor belt player who managed 2 senior appearances for the Blues and spent last season with Ipswich in the Championship. It made sense for both sides to make it permanent. Jacob Greaves has had 3 full seasons in the Championship with Hull City. Liam Delap managed 6 appearances for Man City before 2 seasons in the Championship on loans, 1 split between Stoke and Preston and another with Hull. Arianet Muric played for Man City 5 times before getting regular football with half a season at Willem II in the Eredivisie, a full season with Adana Demirspor in the Super League, and was then sold to Burnley in the Championship. When the Clarets played in the Premier League, Muric was dropped. Connor Townsend has plenty of experience, having spent 6 seasons at West Brom as a regular player, including their season in the Premier League where they looked awful in defence, but mostly in the Championship. All these players have been quality in the Championship, but looked pretty lost if they've played in the Prem. The one signing I do like is Ben Johnson, who has always looked pretty good for West Ham, even as a rotation player. I actually could see a world where this guy is wearing an England shirt at some point in his career. This squad then seriously lacks proper experience of being in the Premier League, and yes, that does matter. Look at Luton, some quality players, but most were new to the Prem, and even though most actually praise them, they still got relegated pretty easily. This is the thing with Ipswich. They could go down and everyone will still say how great they were, how they gave it a go and didn't roll over. I wouldn't be too surprised if they came 19th or 18th. Of course, it may be tempting for people who know nothing about Ipswich, which is most people, to prove their footballing nous by predicting them to come 14th or something, showing that they know the story about the genius manager Kieran McKenna, who took the team from League One to the Prem. Well, fine, his stock may rise higher, and to be honest, it's no guarantee they keep him. But tell me, what's their starting 11 going to be? Can you? Who's going to score the goals to keep them up? If you can't, it may be worth revising your bullishness on Ipswich Town. 19th. AFC Bournemouth. This seems like a pretty lazy prediction after what's happened since the preview video. They have their best finish ever, sell one big name player, and suddenly they're going down. Very creative. They won their last pre-season friendly 3-2 at home to Girona. Goalie Alex Paulson has been loaned out for the season back to Auckland FC, but the big news is the sale of striker Dominic Solanke to Spurs for £65 million. Well, they better hurry up and spend it. Solanke managed 19 league goals last season, which was only bettered by Erling Haaland, Cole Palmer and Alexander Isak. Can Enes Unal, who was completely overshadowed in a loan spell but the Cherries were forced to buy anyway, become the main man? Actually, maybe he can. Before this, he managed 30 goals in 2 seasons in La Liga at Getafe. At the same time, Solanke has made his shoes incredibly hard to fill, and even if Unal does pretty well, the output is almost certainly going down. That output is incredibly important, and the Cherries are also lacking defensive solidity, with no side that stayed up last season conceding more than them, apart from West Ham. They have signed 19-year-old centre-back Dean Huijsen for £12.8 million, but despite his potential and an impressive half-season at Roma last term, he's very raw and may find a relegation battle tough going. Being a teenager and part of a squad that regularly concedes multiple goals a game will be hard. Last season, they could concede two and score three. I'm not sure they have that luxury again. A lot of their players feel like the AI players in pro clubs, ever present and familiar, but not standing out in any way. I'm also not sure either way about Antonio Raiola, although I suppose one can't argue with his results last season. 18th, Southampton. I was tempted not to put another promoted club because it seems lazy, but it's probably going to happen. In their last pre-season game, they drew a friendly 0-0 at home to Getafe. On the one hand, it probably shouldn't, because they brought in a few players. Taylor Harwood-Bellis has been made permanent, although is still yet to play Premier League football, while the admittedly ageing Adam Lallana and Charlie Taylor bring PL experience. Unlike Ipswich, though, I think it's fine to have some players like Harwood-Bellis that have most their experience in the second flight, because there's still a Premier League core. The only problem is, it's a core of players who got relegated 2 seasons ago for a reason, and has probably gotten staler since then after a year of playing against worse players. Flynn Downs joins after a successful loan, while Yukinari Sugawara is an interesting addition from RZ. The main striker is Ben Brereton Diaz. Brereton Diaz was a hero for Blackburn, with 36 league goals in 2 seasons, earning him a move to Villarreal. He did absolutely nothing there, which meant he was loaned to Sheffield United. We all know how rubbish the Blades were, which makes 6 goals in 14 league games very good. I wouldn't look too much at what happened in Spain, because he's never going to be the main man at a big club, especially one with Alexander Surloff and Gerard Moreno up front. Now Che Adams has gone, Brereton Diaz will expect to be the main man, and if he fires, Southampton could be alright. But it is still a big if, and overall I'm not convinced by them, nor am I sure about Russell Martin, who would probably be axed at the first sniff of trouble. 17th, Leicester City. Leicester are one of the clubs with the highest variability here, because I could actually see them being quite good. But I don't think they will be. Of course, they are among the most likely to pick up a points deduction. Since the preview video, they have signed number 10 Facundo Buonanotte from Brighton on loan, and also lost their last friendly 3-0 away to Lens. Buonanotte is a pretty good asset, and they may hope to get him for good next year. They may have actually downgraded since last season. Bobby Decordova-Reid is a really nice acquisition for free, while I can see Caleb Okoli succeeding. However, the loss of Kiernan Dewsbury Hall will bite them. In general, they looked way too good for the Championship last season, but what I don't think they are is a particularly notable team in the Premier League. I can't imagine that an ageing Jamie Vardy will combine with Steffi Mavididi for 30 league goals at this level, like they did last season in the second tier, and they may be just a signing or two off the pace. Steve Cooper has Premier League quality, but ended up sacked from Nottingham Forest, and will have to go against some pretty good minds this term in the relegation scrap. 16th, Nottingham Forest. I very nearly had Forest going down because I didn't want 2 promoted clubs, but the more I considered it, the more I thought they'd stay up, and then thought about it some more and have them higher than Leicester and Brentford. Just about, however, and then I put them back below Brentford. They won their last friendly, 4-3 away to Olympiacos, which at this point is basically a sister club. Last season they were 6 points clear of Luton, or 10 if you consider the deduction. The probers aren't going to stop looking at Forest, which won't help matters. The good is personal, because they have a couple players I just like, such as Taiwo Awoniyi and Anthony Elanga. The bad is that their squad, dripping in talent, is not so dripping in actual quality. Chris Wood managed 14 league goals last season and they stayed up, cementing his status as a god of relegation battles. It was his 5th double-digit haul, and the first 4 came with Burnley, who went down the second they sold him. Can he do it again? Quite possibly. Nunes Barrito Santo is a good manager, which will help. But this Forest team, despite all the money invested, flew very close to the sun both seasons since they came up, and this time their additions are much less notable, although I like the acquisition of Elliot Anderson. Expect them not to stun, but survive, as a few more teams will be ultimately more incompetent than them once again. 15th, Brentford. Brentford will probably continue to be a side battling to stay up, although doing so successfully this season. Since the preview video, they have had 2 home friendlies with Wolfsburg, drawing one 4-4 and winning the second 2-1, though the second one was at the training ground with no fans. More importantly, they signed attacking midfielder Fabio Carvalho from Liverpool for an undisclosed sum. For now, Ivan Toney, who has 1 year left on his contract, stays, and he better, given how bad they looked without him. Their preemptive replacement, Igor Thiago, took about 5 minutes of pre-season to get injured for the first half of the campaign, which won't help. Even if he was fit, he's one of just 2 signings, and he's come in for a big fee after two big seasons, one in the Bulgarian league with Ludogorets and the second in the Belgian league for Bruges. The thing is, both those teams dominate their country's league, especially Ludogorets, and chances don't come like that in the Premier League. The other signing is Carvalho, who will relish first-team football after limited opportunities at Anfield and in a loan spell at RB Leipzig, and he will hope to reinvigorate a team that last season seemed a bit tired and out of ideas. He finally got that at Hull for the latter half of last season and did well. In fact, his signing made me move them up a place in the rankings, although I'm under no illusions that this player isn't pretty raw, and Liverpool have let him go for a reason. Thomas Frank is a good, but not perfect manager, but it's not like the rest of the relegation candidates don't have good managers. And a lot of miracle workers couldn't keep things going forever. Sean Dyche's Burnley and Eddie Howe's Bournemouth eventually faced the drop. This won't happen this time, but it'll be another pretty dull season in West London. 14th, Wolverhampton Wanderers. This was a decision to make between them and another team, but I've gone for Wolves. The more I looked into that other team, the more I put them up, and they eventually got placed 10th. Since the preview video, they lost a friendly 1-0 at home to Rayo Vallecano, and more importantly, sold Pedro Neto to Chelsea for £54 million. Add that to Max Kilman and its £94 million in sales, which they have reinvested on worse players. To be honest, I think that the money that they've got for those two is worth much more than their quality. There are an abundance of centre-backs as good as Kilman, and I think Neto may find it tough at Chelsea. That said, it can't be denied that they are important pieces of the Wolves puzzle, and very hard to replace, with Kilman as club captain. Rodrigo Gomes comes in from the same place, Braga, and Pedro Lima has come in defence, but I don't think they'll fit in nearly the same way. I'm also not sure about Gary O'Neill. It feels like some such English manager always appears out of nowhere, destined to be quoted by TalkSport and the likes of how unfairly English managers are treated. Does a good job early on, and then has a pretty forgettable career. It's unfair to put O'Neill in that bracket yet. He genuinely did do well at Bournemouth and Wolves, although I think that that's all that's happened. He's been good so far. He's also someone it's quite easy for them to panic and get rid of if things go badly. So after all this negativity, why 14th? Well, they have a squad with a fair bit of quality, although like Nottingham Forest, it does feel a bit unbalanced. I also see a bunch of players who are very used to playing at this level, and this squad was panicked about last time and turned out to be more than fine. Hwang Hee-chan and Mateus Cunha managed 11 goals each last season, although neither had done that before, and it's unclear whether they do that again. Perhaps the high position is just based on the experience and the fact that other teams have more problems. They're the last team on this list I realistically expect could go down. 13th, Everton. Everton is a team which throughout last season I constantly said things like, they're pretty good actually, and they are under Sean Dyche, but only to a limited extent. Despite their PSR-marred position, they should not be compared to the likes of Brentford and Forest, because their actual team is much better, although not as good as it should be for the money. Since the last preview video, they drew 1-1 in their final friendly at home to Roma. They also loaned central midfielder Tyler Onyango to Stockport. Anyway, Amadou Onana is a big loss for them, and while I don't have them higher, though Jake O'Brien is an interesting signing. Of course, I can't ignore PSR entirely, and I also think they have some gaps in the squad, especially with the Onana-shaped hull. I'm a fan of Abdoulaye Doucouré, but playing him as the man behind the striker feels like something people would do on Football Manager to make fun of Sean Dyche. Everton scored the least goals out of anyone apart from Sheffield United last season, but also conceded less than anyone apart from Man City, Arsenal or Liverpool. Sean Dyche may not like the stereotypes about him eating gravel and playing Brexit football, but they aren't made up, at least in the latter case, and it's successful for him, so I don't see the problem in it. Expect Everton to sometimes bore, sometimes shine, and easily stay up, providing they don't have any deductions. 12th, Fulham. Fulham seems a strange club to put so high again, and are often considered one of the more forgettable clubs in the top flight. Since the preview video, centre-back Tim Ream was sold to Charlotte FC for an undisclosed sum, while striker Kieran Bowie was sold to Hibs for £600,000. Also, they won their last friendly 2-0 away to Hoffenheim. The big departure is Joao Palhinha, who may be the biggest loss for anyone in the whole division, as well as Tosin Adarabioyo, which has done a number on their defence. At the same time, they have one of the best shot stoppers in football in Bernd Leno, and they still have talented players. Marco Silva has proven that he can do a job with Fulham, although he has been inconsistent at times in his career. Fulham are a team I expect to be worse than last season, but should still be just fine, and there are plenty of teams worse than them. However, I could also see them dropping a few places lower. 11th, Brighton and Hove Albion. Brighton have been an interesting team for a while now, although still one I'm not sure about. They still don't feel like troubling the Big Six, and they look a fair bit off European football. They beat Villarreal 4-0 at home in their last friendly, and got two men out of the door. Forward Dennis Undav joined Stuttgart for an undisclosed sum, while attacking midfielder Facundo Buonanotte joined Leicester on loan. Brighton are a team I'm not at all convinced by, but I still think they're better than the other teams below them on this list, so I put them this high up. Fabian Hutzler has just gotten St. Pauli promoted and deserves a step up, but at the same time, this is his second job in management. Their signings have been a bit strange and could range from inspired to flops, and I'm edging towards the latter. Can Yankuba Minte and Mats Vifa make the step up? I'm not sure. Their squad is unbalanced. It feels like this generation has had its best days already, and the manager is inexperienced. Their data-led approach has got them to this level, but everyone is copying them now anyway. Still, 12th would be the floor rather than a ceiling for the Seagulls, and I have them 11th. 10th, Crystal Palace. I debated putting them below Wolves, but the more I thought about it, the more that I thought the Eagles are better. Then I kept moving them up as I considered Everton and Brighton as well, and then Fulham, whom I also moved below the Seagulls. Since the last video, they drew their final friendly at home to Nantes 1-1. So the big news this season is the sale of Michael Elise, a fantastic player. Although at Palace, they have the luxury of him not being one that they absolutely need. They still have a good enough core to stay up, and by the time that they sell one player for over £50 million, another one worth that amount, Adam Wharton, spawns out of nowhere. Well, that's not true. They paid about £20 million for him from Blackburn, but he has made a huge step up from last season, and of course, being both young and English will help any fee they would eventually get for him. They also still have the likes of Eberechi Eze, Mark Gay, a core of three English hot properties with Wharton, and Jean-Philippe Mateta was in brilliant form last season. With forwards, I'm always wary about whether they can repeat big seasons, but Mateta seems like the real deal. I also like the signing of Daichi Kamada, although I'm less sure about Ismail Assar. With all this talent, why don't they make a step up to challenge for Europe? Well, even though I think the honeymoon period concept is a bit of a myth, it was clear that Oliver Glasner's men had just that following his appointment, and we've seen it before with Palace flattering to deceive. They can also be a little bit unbalanced. Expect some great moments, but inconsistency. 9th, West Ham United. West Ham have made some big moves in the transfer window. Since the preview video, centre-back Jean-Claire Todibo has been signed on loan from Nice, while central midfielder Patrick Kelly and striker Callum Marshall have been loaned to Doncaster and Huddersfield, respectively. They also drew their final friendly at home to Celta Vigo, winning on penalties. Max Kilman, Nicholas Fulkrug, Crescencio Somerville, Luis Guilherme. For the most part, I don't really like these signings. At the same time, I think their squad is good enough anyway, with or without them, to reach the top half. I'm also not convinced with Julen Lopetegui as a manager, although a new start may help them after Irons fan got sick of David Moyes. I'm really not sure what Moyes did wrong, but I think there is a feeling in East London that West Ham is a club with potential to sit at the table with the Big Six, and Moyes couldn't take them there. That certainly won't be the case this season, although West Ham are good enough to avoid any real jeopardy. 8th, Chelsea. Chelsea Football Club in the post-Abramovich era is looking more and more like a social experiment as time goes on, like making a billionaire live in a modest apartment in West London. Of course, the apartment probably costs just as much as his country mansion these days, and Chelsea are still spending. However, they lack the ruthlessness that they used to have, and like a fat man gorging himself to excess, have ended up with a bloated squad and nothing to show for it, just 3 years after winning the Champions League. Ironically, following a transfer embargo which forced them to use academy players. They're always a step behind, with Todd Bowley wanting big-name players, then realising why that's not a good idea, and now wanting any youngster he can get his hands on. 2 transfers have come in since the last video. Centre-back Aaron Anselmino came in for £15.6 million from Boca Juniors, while right-winger Pedro Neto comes for £51.3 million plus £2.6 million in add-ons from Wolves. Centre-back Alfie Gilchrist is loaned to Sheffield United. Anselmino has been loaned back to Boca, while left-back Caleb Wiley, himself a new signing this season, is loaned to Strasbourg. They drew their last friendly 1-1 at home to Inter. Chelsea fans have about 50 players on that menu and are not liking any of them. After the Inter friendly, many were clamouring for 18-year-old Mark Guiu. a £5 million striker they got from Barcelona. This shows how things are when they have a £97.5 million striker rotting away, not even currently on loan, in Romelu Lukaku, who has been forced to train with the under-21s and basically banished. Other forwards who also took eight-figure sums to get to Stamford Bridge are unwanted by their fans. They have kept signing players, but literally none of them are exciting, and only a couple are even impressive. To be fair, it's not all bad. Cole Palmer was a genuine ray of sunshine for Chelsea fans last season, although teams will be more wary of him now when he needs help. They are hoping Mikhailo Mudryk, Raheem Sterling and Christopher Nkunku come into life in their second season. In theory, that's not a bad front four. The midfield needs work. There still isn't a good goalie. Again, with £71.6 million Kepa Arrizabalaga suffering the same fate as Lukaku. That is to say, £170 million worth of talent forced to train with the children, and the defence is on the treatment table more than the pitch. New manager Enzo Maresca has work to do, and as Graham Potter found out, you do not get time to sort things out at Chelsea. A little patience, like Arsenal had with Mikel Arteta, may go a long way, but until it actually happens, Chelsea fans will have to be content with ifs to make them happy. 7th, Aston Villa. Aston Villa have impressed everyone, but things may not be as easy this season. One transfer update, right-back Kane Kesler-Hayden has been loaned to Preston. They beat Athletic Club 3-2 in a friendly in Walsall before losing their last match 2-0 away to Dortmund. Unai Emery has done a transformative job at Villa Park, and 2 consecutive European campaigns prove that. However, it's a competitive league, and keeping it up will be very tough. Spurs are hoping to improve, while Man United and Newcastle surely can't do worse than last season. Their squad tired at the end of last campaign, shown by a winless last 4 games, and their 6-2 aggregate semi-final defeat in the Europa Conference League to a beatable Olympiacos. The thing with fairy tales is that they have happy endings, but football is perpetual, and at some point even pixie dust expires. Still, they'll be transitioning from a team that's overperforming to a team that gets Europe and people think, that's where they should be. Though Villa have plenty of resources, the structural advantages that the Big Six club have can't be ignored. I remember when Arsenal was struggling at the start of Mikel Arteta's reign, and a famous graphic was produced that had them out of the top 6, with Leicester, who had just qualified for Europe twice in a row instead. It doesn't work like that, and Leicester were playing in the EFL 2 years later. Villa will not collapse, but the losses of Douglas Luiz and Moussa Diaby will bite, even though Amadou Onana is a superb replacement. Unai Emery is a brilliant manager, and expect another good season, but a slightly tougher one. No. 6th, Newcastle United. Newcastle are a good team, but they still have work to do. The big news is the signing of striker William Osula for £15 million from Sheffield United. Somehow they haven't sold anyone, but their suddenly penny-pinching signings say a lot. Apart from Lewis Hall, they haven't really made any big signings, just strengthening with backup goalies and the likes. They have also released a whole set of players. Also, they played 2 pre-season games called the Seller Cup, one after the other, with a 4-0 win over Girona and a 1-0 win over Brest. Newcastle had some bad luck with injuries, but their team is still pretty good, and they got 7th last season. I think that Man United will edge ahead of them, but Chelsea and Villa will fall behind. They've kept Eddie Howe for now, despite his links with England, and they still have Alexander Isak, Bruno Guimaraes, Sandro Tonali and others as stars in a great team. However, their defence is still not perfect. They don't have as good a goalkeeper as any of the teams I'd put above them, and they have not taken over the world like everyone expected. They did get top 4 2 seasons ago, but in that campaign, Chelsea were hilariously bad under Frank Lampard, Spurs had the Antonio Conte debacle, and Liverpool also had a pretty horrid season. That could happen again, and I'm expecting things to go badly for Chelsea, but I also think Newcastle won't be quite good enough to take advantage. They are helped by a lack of European football, though. 5th, Manchester United. Like Chelsea, Man United post-Ferguson seems to be a social experiment, although since their FA Cup win, which probably saved Erik Ten Hag's job, the Red Devils fans are on the hope phase of the cycle. Ten Hag was helped by the fact that Ipswich boss Kieran McKenna refused to join, reportedly, a rejection which shows how United are perceived right now. Obviously a step up, they've been a black hole that have harmed the careers of David Moyes, Louis van Gaal, the great Jose Mourinho, and the reputation of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Depending on how Ipswich season goes, McKenna may never get the chance again, but he'd rather stay in Suffolk than the biggest club in the country. Since the preview video, they played the Community Shield, where they went 1-0 up thanks to a late goal, conceded an even later goal, and lost on penalties. Honestly, United have become such a car crash that it is tempting to declare Ten Hag as a bald fraud PE teacher and so on, state that they will come 13th, and gleefully enjoy Mark Goldbridge run out of idioms for how bad they are. In fact, their squad is actually quite good, although in a way they are like Chelsea, with superstars that can play well but often don't. Marcus Rashford has had a great career, but often feels held back by something that would prevent him from reaching the world-class level. Perhaps his mindset, like he's always overthinking, and can play brilliantly for a while, and then forget how to play football. Kobbie Mainoo has been a breath of fresh air for the club, and I really hope United don't ruin him like they have done with a number of big talents, most criminally of all Paul Pogba. Jadon Sancho is back after a good loan spell with Dortmund, although I'm surprised he didn't try to make it permanent. If he can perform for Ten Hag, which is a massive, massive if, then United may be alright. A famous video is going around from the Community Shield with Sancho prepared to come on. United scored, and Ten Hag looks ready to celebrate, realises that Sancho is the closest person to him, and his smile quickly disappears. That relationship needs to be fixed to help United. Few teams have more talent, but those few teams will stop them from getting top four. Fifth it is, meaning they may well be supporting the likes of City, Liverpool and Arsenal in the Champions League to get an EPS berth. Fourth, Tottenham Hotspur. Spurs have become the biggest meme in football because of a prolonged trophy drought. But look at it this way. Before 2008, when they last won a trophy, they were actually pretty rudderless, and at points even looked like relegation material. Now they are a bigger operation than nearly any other football club in the world, play European football regularly, and will never even consider relegation again. Their money-spinning stadium has brought in so much revenue, even more relevant in this era of profit and sustainability rules, and will do in perpetuity. And that makes their footballing operation better too, in theory. No Spurs fan will admit it, but in that regard, Daniel Levy has done a good, even brilliant job. However, Everton has shown that having a lot of money does not bring silverware, and they have had some pretty comical moments in that transitional period. Since the last video, a lot has happened. Firstly, they lost their last pre-season game, the Visit Malta Cup, at home to Bayern 3-2. Right back Emerson Royale has been sold to Milan for an undisclosed fee. Striker Dane Scarlett has been loaned to Oxford. Mainly, striker Dominic Solanke has signed for an undisclosed fee, which probably begins with a 6. I don't know about this. Obviously he's good at football, yes, but he was the main man, and basically the only man, at Bournemouth, allowing him to dial up the goals tally. This was also the case for a bloke named Richarlison at Everton, who then saw reduced output at Spurs, Jack Grealish at Aston Villa, and so on. In fact, Richarlison has not nearly been as bad as many have said, despite a slow start. And 11 league goals isn't that bad an output. Their 11 isn't complete, but is good in a lot of places, with a nice defence, goalie, and all right options going forward. Son Heung-min is a big star, but I've always found him to be brilliant only in patches, and a very inconsistent player, although his output can't be denied. A lot of goals and assists are worth quite a lot in a top 4 battle. Ange Postecoglou was earned credit but will want to progress, and the signings aren't that impressive to me. The goodwill took them back into Europe, but they ran out of gas and lost 5 of their last 7 games, the 2 wins coming against Burnley and Sheffield United. Thursdays will be something to consider as well, as it does cause congestion on one of the smaller squads in the top 6. However, I expect Villa to fall back slightly, and don't think Newcastle nor Man U will do enough, though it will be very close in the latter's case. Third, Liverpool. To be honest, I don't really expect positive things from Liverpool this season. Since the last video, they sold defender Billy Comatio to Dundee for an undisclosed sum, as well as forward Fabio Carvalho to Brentford for £27.5 million, and forward Luis Comas was loaned to Stoke. They played 2 home friendlies in the same day, a 4-1 win over Sevilla and a 0-0 draw with Las Palmas. Of course, the biggest change was that Jurgen Klopp is gone and Arne Slot is in. Klopp did a good job at Liverpool, who were utterly in the mud when he came in, and he has the bling to show for it. Still, the squad seemed pretty tired in his last couple of years, and they have added absolutely no one, as well as having a manager who is not called Jurgen Klopp. Honestly, things could blow up in Arne Slot's face. But this is a team that has Mohamed Salah, Virgil van Dijk and Alisson, plus a huge breadth of talented players elsewhere. I can't pretend that they don't have the best player in the world in two positions and one of the best African footballers ever, although all of them are in their 30s now and will eventually need replacing. Sticking with the current bunch who fell apart in the end of last season is brave, but they are still better than the rest. Second, Arsenal. Yes, I'm sorry. You wanted me to be interesting and predict someone else would win, but give me a reason why Arsenal are suddenly going to have enough to do the business after falling apart at the last for 3 consecutive seasons. They played a friendly at home to Bayer Leverkusen, winning 4-1, and beat Lyon 2-0 in the Emirates Cup as well since the last video. Arsenal rely heavily on their wingers, Bukayo Saka and Gabriel Martinelli, but the latter did not have much fun last season, and Leandro Trossard is waiting to take his spot. Kai Havertz has been a good false nine, but this somewhat makeshift front three is not as good as City's. Arsenal do have a brilliant defence and good midfield, but that relies on Yuri and Timber and Thomas Partey not getting injured, something which is doubtful. Martinelli needs to find form and keep it for a full season, and with Arsenal playing a huge amount of games due to the new European format, they don't have the same depth as City. However, they still have more quality than nearly any other team apart from Liverpool, and are used to winning Premier League games by now. They also don't fear travelling to away games, a hoodoo in the past for them. They need to show bottle and courage to beat City, but the fact that they haven't been able to yet means that will hurt them. First, Manchester City. What is there to say? They're the best team, with the best manager, and therefore have the highest chance of winning. Some fans have clung on to a hope that somehow they'll get relegated due to the 115 charges surrounding them, but until that actually happens, I'm not saying anything. Since the preview video, they won their first trophy, the Community Shield, with a last-minute equaliser from Bernardo Silva, followed by a win on penalties over Man U. Not everything is perfect at Man City, though. They've had to have a pretty quiet transfer window, although they have kept both Ederson and Kevin De Bruyne. They've been forced to make a big sale in forward Julian Alvarez to Atletico Madrid for £64.4 million plus £17.1 million in add-ons. However, out of their main 11, this was probably the most expendable player for them, and a potential 80 million quid is a great return. Some players are perhaps not what they used to be, including John Stones and especially Kyle Walker. But come on, their manager is the best manager there has ever been, and they have the two best players in the world in Erling Haaland and Rodri. You can get into debates over that, but I don't really care. The competition for that title doesn't come from the Premier League anyway. In addition to that, they are serial winners who keep winning trophies to the point opposition fans just shrug their shoulders rather than hate them. With all this in mind, am I supposed to prove my unique football brain by saying that actually this time they'll lose out? It could happen, because Arsenal and Liverpool have huge quality, but I just don't think it will. Well, there it is. Remember to flame me in the comments for my terrible opinions and tell me what the correct table will be below. It helps the algorithm. Thank you for listening.